My daughter's blood was soaking through my coat when the ER nurse said we can't operate without payment. I called my father. He laughed. You had her. You deal with her. Then he hung up, and just when I thought I'd lose everything, a man I didn't know sat beside me, and what he whispered next, it changed everything. But I had no idea what it would cost me. It didn't start like this. I once believed that if I just worked harder, kept my head down, and gave up enough of myself, they'd finally see me, that maybe one day my parents would stop seeing me as nothing more than a blemish on the family name. But that day never came. When I told them I was pregnant, they didn't yell, they didn't cry, they just exhaled, like disappointment had finally confirmed itself. My mother muttered, "You always had to be different," and my father walked out of the room without a word. That silence never ended. I raised Narina alone. No baby showers, no family dinners, just diapers, night shifts, and the sound of her tiny heartbeat against my chest after another long day at the diner. Every laugh she gave me was mine alone. Every fever, every milestone mine to face, mine to fix. I sent Christmas cards, birthday photos, updates they never asked for, hoping, always hoping. But their silence carved itself deeper into my skin year after year. Still I kept going, because Narina deserved more than bitterness. She deserved joy, even if I had to borrow it from the scraps of hope I carried. She was my sun, even on the days I felt like shadows wrapped themselves around my ribs. Sometimes I'd whisper to her while she slept, telling her the stories I wish I'd heard growing up. That she was enough, that she was loved, that she was not a mistake. And still part of me ached, because deep down I wanted my parents to call, to say we were wrong, you're strong, we're proud. But pride doesn't grow in poisoned soil. The last time I saw them before the hospital, it was at my sister Rachel's engagement party. I brought Narina. She wore her favorite yellow dress and clutched a glittery card she'd made for her aunt. Rachel took the card, barely glanced at it, and set it face down on a pile of designer gifts. My mother smiled tight-lipped, like I'd brought a stray dog instead of a child. My father didn't even look at us. That night, I cried in the car while Narina slept in the back seat, her little fingers still clutching a balloon that said, "Congratulations," in cursive gold. That was the moment I realized I'd been hoping for a door that was never going to open. But I still hadn't let go. Not until the night Narina collapsed in our kitchen, clutching her stomach, eyes wide with fear. I called 911 with shaking fingers, held her while the ambulance screamed down the street. The rain was pouring by the time we got to the hospital. I didn't bring a jacket. I didn't think. I just ran. I held her through the doors, her blood soaking into my clothes, begging the nurses to do something, anything. When they took her away, I sat down soaked and shaking and did the one thing I never thought I'd do again. I called my father, and he told me, "You had her. You deal with her." Then he hung up. I don't remember how long I sat there, just that I kept staring at the screen like it might light up again, like maybe they'd call back. Instead, the hallway kept moving. Families, whispering hands, held warmth shared. I was just noise no one could hear. And then as my heart cracked in a way I didn't know was possible, someone sat beside me, not with pity, not with questions, just presence, a handkerchief, a voice, and 7 words I hadn't known I needed. "You're not broken, you're just exhausted. Rest." I didn't even look up at first. I was still staring at the dried blood on my jeans, the shaking in my hands refusing to stop. When the nurse came over with the clipboard, her voice barely broke through the fog in my head. "Miss Walsh." I stood too fast, almost tipping over. "Yes, my daughter Narina. She's in emergency prep now. There's internal bleeding. We need to operate." "Then do it," I whispered. The nurse hesitated. Your insurance has been declined. We'll need a co-signer before we can proceed. The words sliced through me. What we need someone to sign off financially. Immediately. My heart plummeted. I had already tried. My father had hung up on me. My mother told me I made my choices. There was no one else. I'll figure it out, I said, my voice trembling so hard it sounded like static. Please, just please don't wait. The nurse gave me a look I'd seen before. Detached professionalism with a hint of pity. We'll wait as long as we can. Then she turned and walked away, clipboard pressed tight against her chest. I sank back down into the plastic chair, the one that had already molded itself around my grief. My knees buckled and I collapsed, barely landing upright. And before I could even breathe, he stood, the man in the coat, the one who had handed me the handkerchief. I'll handle it, he said quietly. I blinked, confused. What? He met my eyes with terrifying calm. I'll authorize the payment. I shot to my feet, adrenaline lashing out in panic. No, you can't. You don't even know me. His expression didn't change. That's not true. I know exactly who you are. You're a mother doing everything in her power to save her child. I don't need to know anything else. The words hit me like a warmth I wasn't ready for. I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted to say yes. To let someone else carry it just for a moment. But the old reflex snapped into place. Pride, shame, fear. A voice inside me, cold and cruel, whispered, "They'll say you begged. They'll say you failed." "I don't take charity," I said, voice cracking in half. He didn't flinch. "It's not charity. It's perspective." Then softer. "When my daughter was dying, I would have given anything for someone to step in and say, 'Let me stand with you.' I didn't move. I couldn't. The handkerchief he gave me earlier was still in my hand, now streaked with blood and tears. I was clutching it like it might anchor me to something that wouldn't drift away. "I can't owe you something like that," I whispered. "You already don't," he said gently. "You're not weak for accepting help. You're human." Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small embossed card. He placed it on the chair between us like it was sacred. "My assistant's at the front desk. I'll authorize the surgery now. You can decide later if you want to sign the paperwork or walk away." And with that, he stepped back, disappeared into the hallway, leaving me alone. But it wasn't the same kind of alone anymore. It was quiet, still, like someone had opened a window in a room I thought had been sealed forever. I stared at the name on the card. Daniel Sterling. A name I'd heard before. He wasn't just kind. He was someone, a tech mogul, a billionaire who vanished from the press after his daughter died in an accident years ago. But this wasn't about headlines. This was about a man who had seen me when my own family hadn't even picked up the phone. And suddenly I knew, if I walked away from this, and Narina didn't make it because I was too proud to say yes, I would never forgive myself. The surgery began 20 minutes later. I signed what I could with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. The ink smudged across the forms like bruises. I could barely breathe. Daniel didn't come back, but the nurse returned and quietly said Mr. Sterling's team handled everything. I nodded, too raw to speak. But inside, something had broken open. Not in grief, in clarity. My family had abandoned me in the darkest moment of my life, and a stranger, someone who owed me nothing, stood by me with more grace and dignity than the people who raised me. I sat in that same chair, staring at the space he had occupied. The handkerchief lay on my lap, soft and still scented faintly of cedar, and something older, like old libraries, like kindness. I held on to it like a prayer. And when my phone buzzed again, I braced myself. Voicemail. From my mother. I pressed play. Her voice was sharp, icy, So now you're begging strangers for help. How pathetic. If you think taking money from a billionaire makes you some kind of martyr, think again. You are a disgrace to this family, Eliza. And if you go through with this, don't bother coming back. The message ended. Another one followed. My father this time. You had the kid. You raise her. Don't expect us to clean up your mess. Men like that don't do charity. They collect favors. So congrats, you just sold your pride. I dropped the phone. The tears didn't come, not because I was numb, but because I finally saw it for what it was, a sickness I'd been taught to drink like medicine. They were never going to love me. Not if I cured cancer. Not if I raised Narina into a queen. Not even if I bled forgiveness for the rest of my life. To them, I was the sin that never got washed away. And somehow knowing that, really knowing it, felt like a kind of peace. A nurse walked by again. This time she looked at me, really looked, and I felt it, the shift, not in them, in me. She made it. Those were the only words I remember the nurse saying after the surgery. She's stable. She'll sleep for a while. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just let the relief crash over me in silent waves, knocking the breath out of me. I should have felt victorious, but all I felt was scraped raw. Grateful, yes, but also exposed, because someone had seen me at my lowest and hadn't flinched. And that somehow was more terrifying than being alone. Daniel didn't come back right away, but I clutched that handkerchief like it was armor. Then my phone buzzed again. New message. This time it wasn't my parents. It was Rachel, my older sister, the golden child, the one who'd always done everything right. The message was short, sharp. Mom says you're putting Narina in danger. She's calling CPS. You should have asked for help the right way instead of making us look like monsters. This is your last warning. The words blurred on the screen. My lungs stopped working. They weren't just shaming me anymore. They were coming for her. I felt my knees give. The chair beside me caught me before the floor did. The plastic edge pressed into my side like a reminder. You're not safe yet. I don't remember reaching for Daniel's card, but somehow it was already in my hand. His name stared back at me. Daniel Sterling. I must have looked pale, or maybe just broken, because the next thing I knew, he was there again. Quiet, steady, carrying 2 cups of vending machine coffee. He handed one to me. Didn't say a word at first. I didn't thank him. Not yet. Instead, I whispered, "They're trying to take her from me." He didn't ask who, didn't need to. I showed him the message. His jaw tightened, just slightly. "They're not just trying to humiliate you," he said. "They want to erase you." I nodded, eyes fixed on the text message that still burned across the screen. "I don't have a lawyer. I don't have money. They'll twist everything. The hospital bills, the help I took from you. They'll make me look unstable, unsafe." He reached into his coat, pulled out a folded slip of thick paper and handed it to me. "Call this number. First thing in the morning. Her name's Veronica Chu, one of the best family attorneys in the state. Tell her I sent you." I stared at the paper. I can't afford a lawyer like this. Daniel met my eyes. "You don't need to. She's already on retainer. She owes me more than a few favors." I didn't know what to say. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He looked over at the room where Narina slept. The monitors beeped steady, soft, like proof that miracles sometimes have wires and tubes. Because once he said slowly, someone I loved needed a miracle, and no one came. I can't change what happened to her, but maybe I can change what happens to you. I looked down at the paper, at the handkerchief, at the coffee he brought that had already gone cold in my hands. This wasn't rescue. It was witness, and somehow That was even more powerful. I didn't sleep that night. I sat beside Narina's bed, her tiny hand curled around my finger. Her skin was warm, her breathing soft and even. At dawn, I called the number. Veronica's voice was clear, sharp, no nonsense. Within minutes, she had already pulled court documents, flagged my family's past attempts at guardianship, and requested a hearing. When I told her about the messages, her tone shifted. Save those. Forward them to me. They won't know what hit them. I looked at Narina, at the soft rise and fall of her chest. I had let people hurt me all my life, but not her. Never her. For the first time in forever, I felt something more than fear. I felt fire. 3 days later, I stood outside the Boston family courthouse with a folder pressed to my chest like a shield. The wind cut through my coat, but I barely felt it. I was numb, but alert, sharpened. Beside me stood Veronica Chu, sharp heels clicking across the pavement, hairpinned voice steady as stone. I hadn't known what to expect when Daniel referred me to her, but she was unshakable. The kind of woman who had won wars in boardrooms and courtrooms and never needed to raise her voice to do it. "You're ready," she said. "They're not." When we walked into the courtroom, the air shifted. There they were. My mother in a navy peacoat, lips pursed like she was attending a funeral that offended her. My father, arms crossed so tight I thought he might snap his own ribs. And Rachel, my sister, the golden one, clutching a leather file folder like it was a holy book. They looked polished, calm, prepared, but I saw it, the twitch in my mother's jaw, the way Rachel kept adjusting her necklace. My father's eyes never met mine. They weren't here for justice. They were here to erase me. Their lawyer spoke first. He painted a portrait I barely recognized. "Eliza Walsh is emotionally unstable." He began, voice oozing false concern. "She has no stable income, has relied on financial aid from outside sources, and maintains no contact with any immediate family. We believe Narina's welfare is at serious risk." I stared straight ahead. My fingers dug into the edges of the table until I couldn't feel them anymore. Then came the trump card, a guardianship agreement. One I had signed years ago, temporarily assigning Rachel as Narina's caregiver. During a week I'd been hospitalized for exhaustion. They slid it across the table like a trophy. I could feel the judge's eyes on me. The weight of it all, my past, my fear, the blood on my jacket that night, threatened to crush me. But Veronica didn't blink. She rose slowly, calm, controlled, and laid down her response like pieces on a chessboard. Bank records, employment verification, pay stubs, a notarized letter from the hospital confirming I had never left Narina unattended, a copy of the text messages, and then audio recordings. She paused, turned to me, gave the smallest nod. I stood. My legs were shaking, my heart pounding against my ribs like a fist. But my voice was steady. "I'd like to submit 2 voicemails as evidence," I said. The judge nodded. I pressed play. First, my mother's voice filled the room. "You made your choices, Eliza. You decided to be a single mother. Go prove it. Then Rachel's mom says you're putting Narina in danger. She's calling CPS. You should have asked for help the right way instead of making us look like monsters. This is your last warning." The courtroom went silent. My mother's face froze. Rachel looked like someone had slapped her across the soul. Veronica stepped forward. "These aren't the words of concerned guardians," she said coolly. "These are threats, coercion, punishment." Then she stepped aside. The judge looked at me. "Do you have anything else to say, Miss Walsh?" I looked down at my daughter's bracelet on my wrist. Plastic beads, pink and blue, spelling out hero. "I've made mistakes," I said. "I've been tired, broke, terrified. But I have never abandoned my daughter, not in surgery, not in sickness, not even when the people who raised me did. My mother stood suddenly. "You ungrateful," the judge slammed his gavel. "Sit down, ma'am. This is a custody hearing, not a family feud." Just like that, it was over. An hour later, we stood in the courthouse hallway, the judge's ruling still ringing in my ears. Custody remains with the mother. Allegations dismissed. Contact not recommended. Veronica handed me the folder of documents, her voice softer now. "You didn't just survive in there. You won." And across the marble atrium, I saw him. Daniel Sterling, not in a suit, no entourage, just standing there, watching. I walked to him, each step lighter than the last. "She's safe," I said. He nodded. "So are you. No cameras, no headlines, just a quiet moment between two people who had lived through fire. And then I took my daughter home. Not to a mansion, not to a fairy tale, just a second-floor walk-up with chipped paint and floors that creaked. But when I opened the door and Narina stepped inside, her tiny hand wrapped around mine like armor, it felt like a kingdom. "Are we safe now, Mommy?" she asked. I knelt down and touched her cheek. "We are baby," I whispered. "We're safe now." That night, while Narina slept, curled up with her stuffed giraffe under our thrift store quilt, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by silence. Not the sharp silence of shame or fear, but the kind that let me breathe. I pulled out the drawer I used to avoid, the one filled with unopened bills, unanswered letters, and appointment reminders I was too tired to face. I sorted through them slowly, methodically. Then I gathered them into a paper bag and carried it down to the alley trash chute. One by one, I dropped them in, not because everything was fixed, but because I wasn't afraid of them anymore. When I came back upstairs, I reached into the pocket of the coat I hadn't worn since that night in the ER. The handkerchief was still there, wrinkled, stained, soft. It still smelled faintly of cedar and rain. I laid it on the shelf above Narina's coloring books and the chipped mug that held our mismatched spoons, not as a relic, not as debt, but as a monument, a symbol of that moment when someone had seen me, stayed with me, and reminded me that I wasn't broken. I had survived, and I was still standing. In the morning, the sun streamed through the crooked blinds, golden and warm. Narina twirled across the living room in her pink socks, giggling like the world had never tried to break us. Then my phone buzzed. New message, blocked number. "You humiliated this family. You think this is over, Eliza. It's not." I stared at it for one long, still moment. Then I calmly hit block. No adrenaline, no panic, just clarity. Then another message arrived, this time from Daniel's assistant. "Mr. Sterling would like to invite you to a small community leadership roundtable. It's focused on child advocacy and post-crisis support for single parents. You've been asked to speak." I blinked. My thumb hovered over the screen. Me, a speaker. I looked across the room at Narina. Her laugh filled the space like bird song. I thought about every night I sat up crying in the dark, wondering if I was enough, if I would ever stop feeling like a walking apology. And then I thought about the courtroom, the judge's voice, the way my words rang through the silence. Maybe I wasn't meant to stay small. Maybe surviving wasn't the end of the story. That afternoon, I pulled out a blank notebook and began to write. Not for court, not for apology. For me, for the woman who'd walked through fire holding her child and refused to let go. 2 weeks later, I stood behind a podium in a drafty community center. Folding chairs, lukewarm coffee, a shaky mic stand. But to me, it might as well have been a national stage. My name tag read Eliza Walsh, advocate, mother, survivor. I wore Narina's hospital bracelet around my wrist, the one she made with plastic beads that spelled out hero. The room quieted. I stepped up to the mic. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. I was abandoned in a hospital waiting room while my daughter fought for her life. The people who were supposed to protect me chose shame over support. But someone I didn't know, a stranger, chose kindness. He didn't rescue me. He sat beside me. He saw me. And because of that, I learned to see myself again. Faces in the crowd blurred, but I felt their attention like gravity. I used to think survival was the finish line, but I've learned it's only the beginning. Because surviving doesn't mean silence. It means using your voice even if it shakes, especially if it shakes. A few heads nodded. A woman in the back wiped her eyes. We don't always get to choose the families we're born into, but we do get to choose what kind of ancestors we become. For my daughter, I chose better, and for myself, I finally did too. Applause didn't crash over me. It rose gently like dawn, steady, real. Afterward, Narina ran up to the stage and threw her arms around my waist. "Mommy," she whispered, "you talked like a superhero." I laughed, blinking through tears. "Only because you gave me my powers." Daniel waited until the room cleared before approaching. No spotlight, no headlines, just presence, always presence. He handed me an envelope. I hesitated. "It's not more money, is it?" He smiled. "No, it's a contract. I've been searching for someone to co-lead a new initiative, support services for women like you. You've got the story, the strength, and now the voice." I stared at it. "Why me?" He looked at Narina. "Because you didn't break, and because you help others believe they don't have to either." I looked down at my daughter. She looked up at me, eyes wide, hands tight around mine. I said yes. That evening we walked home beneath a pale orange sky, Narina skipping ahead on the sidewalk, her hair dancing in the wind, laughter trailing behind her like ribbon. We passed the hospital. The building loomed quiet, ordinary now, no longer a battlefield, just a landmark in the story of who we became. I paused not out of fear but reverence. This was where everything fell apart, and where everything else began. I took a breath and kept walking. Our apartment still had scuffed floors and a heater that hissed like an old cat. The faucet still leaked. The cupboards creaked. But it was home. The air smelled like cinnamon and crayons. Narina's drawings were taped proudly to the fridge, and on the shelf, still nestled between her watercolor set and our chipped mug, lay the handkerchief. Clean now, but creased and sacred. A quiet flag of a night we survived. I tucked her into bed as she hummed to herself, her stuffed giraffe tucked beneath one arm, fingers curled in her blanket. "You're happy?" I asked softly. She nodded. "I like this home better. No yelling. Just us. Just us." That night I made tea in the quiet, sat by the window, opened my notebook again. I wasn't writing for survival anymore. I was writing for clarity, for memory, for the woman who needed to read it a year from now and remember what she did, what she survived, and who she protected. In the morning, an email came through. Subject line: Boston Voices. Keynote invite. I blinked at the screen. I had to reread it twice. Daniel's team had submitted my name for a larger conference on post-crisis advocacy. The committee wanted to hear my story. I laughed out loud, not out of disbelief, out of joy. Not because I thought I was unworthy, but because I finally believed I had something worth saying. Later that week, I was invited to visit the offices of the new initiative, the Ember Foundation. That was the name Daniel said. It was inspired by the people who survive fire, still glowing, still alive. He asked if I wanted to be more than a speaker. He offered me a leadership role. I accepted, but I asked for one thing first: a copy of my courtroom recording. The moment I stood up and let their voices, their cruelty, echo back at them, I wanted to remember the day I stopped apologizing for needing help, for being strong, for protecting my daughter like my life depended on it, because it did. We framed the transcript and hung it in the Foundation's office lobby. The last line reads, "For my daughter, I chose better. And for myself, I finally did too." Weeks passed, then months. The calls stopped, the threats evaporated. My family shrank into the shadows of their own making. But Narina grew. She started second grade with a new backpack and a new confidence that made me ache with pride. She asked if she could start a club at school, something for kids whose moms help people who are scared. I said yes. One night, she crawled into bed beside me and asked Mommy, "Do you think some people are born to be heroes?" I kissed her forehead. I think some people become heroes when they have no other choice. A few days later, a package arrived. No return address. Inside a single sheet of paper with my mother's handwriting. It read, "I didn't know you had it in you." I hope she never has to. There was no apology, no warmth, just one last attempt at power. I didn't respond. I folded it, tucked it into the back of the court file, and slid it into the bottom drawer beneath Narina's old drawings and a newspaper clipping from the Foundation's launch. Some memories are meant to be buried, not erased, just released. That night I sat on the fire escape as the city buzzed around me. Narina slept with her hand tucked beneath her cheek, peaceful, untouched by the weight I carried for so long. And I whispered to the wind, "It's over." Not the fight for justice, not the work, but the war inside me, the one that said I wasn't enough, the one that waited for their approval. That part was done. And in its place something had bloomed, not loud, not flashy, but steady. Legacy. Have you ever had to walk away from family to protect your peace? Have you ever been saved by kindness when the world turned cold? Tell me in the comments. And if you're still in the middle of your own fire, just know you are not broken. You are not alone. And you are not done yet. Like, comment, and subscribe for more true stories of quiet heroes who chose better.